Right, we're often quite critical of the BBC on this station, but I saw two documentaries, really good documentaries, that I think are still on the iPlayer that I highly recommend. Two-parter on something that happened 30 years ago next weekend, and that was the horrendous crash into the Mull of Kintyre of a Chinook. In fact, the documentary is called Chinook Zulu Delta 576, and that was 30 years ago a aircraft that was carrying 29 people, senior officials within the intelligence community in Northern Ireland, some English people as well. There were various people, including a man called Niven Phoenix, who was a senior police officer. But still, we're in a situation where we don't have full answers on what happened with that crash that I'm sure a lot of people remember from the time, because it was so shocking and those people were so senior. But the Ministry of Defence have had the official files on the crash locked away for 100 years, and indeed there were a series of reports, the documentary outlines them, where the pilots were blamed, then they were exonerated, and actually that is something that still remains a point of controversy, not to me and not to most people. But actually I interviewed Sir Peter Bottomley this week, a Conservative MP who still believes the pilots were to blame. I think he's wrong, I put that to him. It was sort of a side point in an interview, but it actually prompted someone to contact me about this and say that I should speak to Niven Phoenix, which I'm about to do now, and I'm delighted he's joining me. He is the son of Niven Phoenix, and Niven himself actually is a commercial pilot. So Niven, you know aircraft really, really well, and thank you for joining me. You spoke brilliantly in the documentary, and perhaps we only have a short time now, but perhaps you could just outline what happened to your father, and what you know and what you don't know and what you'd like to know, I suppose, as well, because you haven't been told the full story and perhaps never will.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Yeah, I actually saw Sir Peter Bottomley on your program the other day, and I wrote to him. To be fair to Sir Peter, he did reply back to me and said he wasn't too au fait with the details and hadn't actually spoken to anyone in the civil service. It was quite a glib remark that he felt they had got it right on the original inquiry. The original inquiry, as you stated, erroneously and falsely blamed the pilots. It's a very easy and quick thing to blame where something goes wrong rather than look at why it went wrong. What came out subsequent and was then withheld from the Board of Inquiry, the Fatal Accident Inquiry, and also from UK government ministers, including Sir Malcolm Rifkind, who you would have seen, Peter, on the actual documentary, saying they were lied to. So the Ministry of Defence
And you've got to, we've got to remember, and I was sort of so shocked by what he was saying in that documentary. I mean, he was the Secretary of State for Defence, and he was
That's
lied to by his own people.
unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And the fact is, it's still going on. And I think what's galvanized a lot of people around it recently is the MOD have repeated the same lies. And when we complained about the fact that they've repeated the same lies, which is really two fingers up to the dead as well as to the families, by saying no fresh evidence or no new evidence has been found, saying that the Chinook itself, the Mark II, was unsafe. And actually, there is plenty of evidence that was available at the time, that was withheld, and that was actually concealed, deliberately concealed from Sir Malcolm Rifkind and from the Fatal Accident Inquiry. So I think this is a play on words. I think it could be semantics by the Ministry of Defence. I think it could be somebody trying to be clever by saying, well, if we say no new evidence was found, we're not really saying that we concealed the evidence. We're just saying that it's not new. They knew about it. They just didn't happen to present it. And because they didn't present it, we didn't get a proper investigation. We didn't get a proper cause. And that then led to subsequent accidents, all of the same line due to airworthiness, which is really the true cause of that accident. Plus the accident XV179, which killed my friends and colleagues in a C-130, which was also a non-airworthy aircraft. Plus the Nimrod accident, where a Nimrod aircraft blew up in midair in Afghanistan, killing 14 people, and again was to do with a lack of airworthiness. And that led to the Haddon Cave report, which also then created the formation of the MAA, the Military Aviation Authority, because the Royal Air Force were seen to be unfit to manage and regulate their own safety. So that's why we have the MAA. But it all stems back to the Chinook, Peter. Had they actually investigated that properly, they would have seen they had a real issue of airworthiness.
And actually, as the documentary points out, and you speak in that documentary, you speak really, really well and make the point so, so clearly. I mean, these were not just. This was not just a recently promoted first officer who was flying these people. These were 29, including your father, the top intelligence people in the United Kingdom, fighting at that stage 30 years ago a very, very complicated, brutal and dreadful war against the IRA. And the people who were flying them were special forces pilots. These were very, very highly trained people who were originally blamed for this. It's a fascinating documentary. I wonder, just in the week that we're in, Niven, and how interesting that you saw that interview with Sir Peter Bottomley, and how interesting that we're connecting this week, although of course I wanted to do something on this actually in a few days' time, closer to the anniversary, which is the 2nd of June, of course. We're in a week where we have a lot of people from the infected blood inquiry. Paula Vennell's giving her evidence. I've interviewed people from who were caught up in the Horizon inquiry. We talk about the Hillsborough inquiry, the Bloody Sunday inquiry, OMA, various things to do with Northern Ireland, other aspects of things that have happened in the rest of the United Kingdom. And there just does seem to be so many examples, including what you have suffered for the last 30 years, not just the tragic loss of your father, who gave a heck of a lot to this country and was building a society and helping keep a society safe where I was growing up, but so many people who've been let down by the state, and now we're in a position that the MOD won't release the files. I just wonder, this is more than just one incident. This is more than just one scandal. This is a system that I think, and I wonder what your perspective is, that is actively working against getting the truth into the public domain.
I totally agree. And there's been some really clear analogies between this. I watched Paula Vennell's yesterday and her crocodile tears on TV, and I was appalled by her behaviour. And it was a very interesting email which was read out, which I think typified her response, and it really also typified the response of the MOD towards the families, where she said she was bored. She was bored by the actions of one of her sub-postmasters who was going through a lot of time, was being prosecuted along with 900 others. She felt bored by it. The disdain that she felt towards those people, the lack of duty of care, it's like a moral cancer, which I think exists at governmental levels within the UK. And I have no idea where it comes from. Privilege, patronage. It's endemic. And I think Sir Peter Bottomley actually said some really good points yesterday. I know he made a glib remark about the Chinook. He actually tacitly sort of apologized to me for it later on, in not so many words. But he did say that civil servants in the UK stick to a line even when it becomes threadbare.
Yeah.
And I found that fascinating. So he recognizes he's the founder of the house. He recognizes there's a problem. He recognizes what they do. He comes from a long line of civil servants, and there's almost this acceptance. This is, well, that's just what we do. And the MOD are doing it again. They're doing it this week. We complained about the fact they'd said, basically lied. They'd lied again in the media, and we'd asked them not to repeat that lie. And barefaced, they put out exactly the same statement in response to our initial complaints.
They put out the same statement that they sent out a couple of years ago, and the same thing, even though they were wrong then and they're wrong now.
Unbelievable. There's some fantastic books. There's The Inconvenient Truth about David Hill, and I picked this up recently, and I actually written one of the forwards to it. I didn't remember writing this, Peter, but if I've got time, I might read out just a very quick paragraph.
Go for it.
Of what I wrote when I was in my late 20s. And it says, my mother has been lied to by the Ministry of Defence. It treated my family with utter contempt following the crash, and despicably tried to enact the Warsaw Air Carriage Act to limit payouts to the widows and families. Hardly the actions of a moral outfit. Even after we overturned this obscene effort, it forced my mother to produce receipts of the clothes my father wore on the day of his death and list how many potatoes he would eat in an average year as part of its quest to limit compensation. The callousness was breathtaking and displayed a complete lack of integrity. Quite frankly, we were treated like Irish peasants by uncaring, absentee, feudal landlords, and the disdain was palpable.
Goodness me, powerful words. We're talking about your father and we're remembering his death, but I want to remember his life as well, because he gave a heck of a lot to this country. He was someone who was a very, very senior figure within the police in Northern Ireland. When you think of him, he was also quite a character as well, from everything that everybody says and has written about, and I've read a lot since seeing the documentaries. When you think of him on the anniversary of his death next Sunday, who will you remember? What will you remember about your father? Because I don't want to just think about his death. I want to think about the person he was.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think everyone's going to be doing that. And, you know, I'm very privileged to spend time with my father. As you know, Peter, from growing up in Northern Ireland, you know, I was lucky to get 21 years. So I think about the good times. I had a fantastic time, good relationship with my father. You know, we would go fishing together. He taught me how to shoot. He used to teach me about to shoot by following me um, through the braes now McGee where we grew up and throwing up tin cans behind me, and I'd have to turn and shoot. So I basically learned to shoot very instinctively, which means I can only hit things when I'm surprised.
Goodness
um,
me.
so you know, if I plan to shoot something, I never hit it. And you know, he had such an enormous sense of well-being. He was a very positive man. So even though he would drive every day to Gough Barracks in Armagh through bandit country, you know, which I'm sure you know what that means, and you know, if a gun under his, it never fazed him, and he was an extreme example of resilience. That resilience is actually things that you do, not things that you are. He loved being in nature. He loved being with his family, and you know, he loved poetry. He was a very interesting and unique individual.
Well, we will remember Ian Phoenix and indeed the 28 others who tragically lost their life in the Mull of Kintyre Chinook crash 30 years ago next weekend. Niven, I wish you well. Keep up the fight, and I hope you get further answers, because there are, as we know, just so many questions still unanswered in all of that. But what we do know is that the pilots were exonerated, and we should absolutely remember that. Thank you to Niven Phoenix there.